let's talk Game of Wool. Okay, so if you've been online in the past couple of weeks, you'll be aware that we've started the first series of Game of Wool on Channel 4 in the UK. And you'll be aware that there's been mixed feelings about it. I'm not going to be giving you a review, criticism, critique, for the most part, of the show itself, largely because lots of other people have already done it. There are obviously issues with the show. There quite often are in the first series of a show. There are quite often issues with shows that are produced as the first of that type from a production company, as is the case with Game of Wool. It's a fairly small production company as far as I know, and they've not done this type of a format of show before. And there are also lots of misunderstandings around knitting and knitting techniques and various things that have come to light through the broadcasting of the show that are probably held fairly widely, I would have thought, particularly amongst people who are maybe not as deep into knitting as some of us. So yes, there are issues. They've been discussed at length online already, so we're not going to add fuel to the fire there. In general terms, I don't think the show has necessarily hit its stride yet. I don't think it necessarily entirely knows whether it's aiming at new knitters, experienced knitters, or people who've never knitted at all. But that's one of those things. It'll find its groove eventually, I am sure. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at patterns that you could use to do similar inspired projects that we've seen on the show. So I'm going to go through the 4 challenges that we've had so far and give you some pattern ideas that you might want to use to do something similar or something in that kind of a vein, something with the same sort of vibe as what we've seen on the show, particularly if you don't want to use the patterns and kits that have come out the day after the show aired from some of the sponsors of the show, because it's on a commercial channel and that means that the TV programmes are advertising. So yeah, first up, let's go back to the first episode. That's 2 weeks ago. Episode 3 is this Sunday, so tomorrow as this drops. So the first week, a couple of weeks ago, the first solo challenge was a Fair Isle tank top in 12 hours using chunky yarn. Fair Isle doesn't use chunky yarn. What they were actually asked to do was produce a piece of stranded colourwork. Fair Isle is a form of stranded colourwork. It is not all of stranded colourwork. It's like Scottish people are British, but not all British people are Scottish. That's kind of the thing with Fair Isle and all these different techniques. So first up, let's look at a couple of patterns that will actually give you a Fair Isle garment. First up, we have a pattern that I have knit myself. This involves multiple steeks, it involves lace knitting, and it involves Fair Isle style knitting. This is the Terra Nova pattern by Jennifer Beale. It's a great knit. I really enjoyed doing this one. Definitely not a beginner pattern. Don't do this as your first garment pattern. In fact, probably don't do stranded colourwork at all for your first project. There are tension issues that you need to be aware of when doing stranded colourwork. So it could be quite frustrating as a beginner, like who's never knit anything at all before. If you've done a couple of things and you know your knits and your purls and you're feeling confident, give it a go. Maybe on something smaller than a sweater. But, you know, bit of confidence behind you, bit of experience behind you, you'll be fine. So this is the Terra Nova by Jennifer Beale, which is a delightful pattern. I knit mine in Knit Picks because the Shetland wool that I would have loved to have got hold of was just too expensive for my budget at the time. And getting the Knit Pick stuff, I was able to do a second garment for less than it would have cost me to use the Shetland wool. But traditionally, it would be Shetland wool that you would use for Fair Isle. Fair Isle is knit with 2 colours per row maximum, and it's knit in a wool that's going to kind of lock together really nicely and give a very firm, well, not firm, that's the wrong word, very coherent fabric, so not a lot of holes in it. It's very consistent, and it's a finer yarn than they used on the show. So you'll quite often see alternating stripes of different colours or colour combinations. You'll often see contrasting stripes of larger and smaller patterns throughout the garment. So the smaller patterns are the peri patterns, peri meaning small. I'm not entirely sure what the technical term for the larger patterns is, but they'll be consistent, they'll be repetitive patterns the whole way around the garment. They won't be altering as they go. So you get this very sort of structured, geometric, striped pattern happening with Fair Isle. Another example of a Fair Isle style pattern that will give you the tank top style is the Academic by Skeindeer Knits. This is a sample that's been knit up by somebody else that I'm showing on the screen. So again, you've got those stripes of alternating colour combinations, stripes of wider and narrower patterns going all the way up, but that will give you the tank top that was part of the remit for the challenge in week 1. If, however, you wanted to do something more in the vein of what they actually produced on the show, you're looking at stranded colourwork patterns rather than specifically Fair Isle. Stranded colourwork is a huge section of colourwork knitting. There are cultural variations from pretty much everywhere that has a history of knitting. So you're going to see lots of ones that are going to fit in with specific cultures. I've tried to steer a little bit clear of the ones that are very definitely cultural stranded colourwork patterns with a history to them, and go for more of the modern twist on stranded colourwork, which was part of the brief. It was a modern twist on Fair Isle that they were asked to do. So first up we have the Nature Leaves Impressions, which is a shawl by Lotte Vahlkvist. So this is a lovely colourwork pattern. So you see it's not got the same geometric feel to it. In this case, it's been knitted with 2 contrasting colour changing yarns, which I think is a fantastic use of yarns. And it's got a lovely border on it as well. So this I think would be quite a nice pattern to knit if you're looking for a shawl pattern. Again, not necessarily for your first shawl, but when you've got a shawl or 2 under your belt, or a garment or 2 under your belt, or a blanket or 2, and you've got a little bit of confidence, just not your very first project. But yeah, it gives a nice overall impression. It's much more painterly looking than the Fair Isle patterns. Next up we have, for your modern twist, the Survival Mode PixelKnitSocks by Kayla Baldwin. So this is very definitely modern stranded colourwork. If you're knitting socks and you're used to knitting socks and you've got your fit right, bear in mind that stranded colourwork tightens up the tension of what you are knitting. It makes the fabric a lot firmer, a lot less stretchy than standard stocking stitch would do. So you're probably going to want to size up a needle, possibly increase your stitch count for knitting these. But these are very clearly Minecraft inspired socks. Bit of fun. Colourwork socks are quite fun to knit once you've got your head round all the different balls of yarn that you're dealing with. And in this case, on some rows you will be dealing with 3 or more colours. Remember, Fair Isle, 2 at the most. In stranded colourwork, you can have multiple colour changes per row or per round, as is the case with these. And yeah, in these socks you have multiple colours per round, not just the 2. Moving on to a couple of sweaters. We have the Hedgie Hug Yoke sweater. So these are the larger pictorial type of imagery going around the yoke. So again, not so much the Fair Isle structured, geometric, alternating stripes style of colourwork, but a larger, more graphic, image-based pattern. And again, a bit of a modern twist. I don't think traditionally to see many hedgehogs on stranded colourwork sweaters. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think that's the case. This one's by Svetlana Svetlana Gibadullina, and that's the Hedgie Hug Yoke sweater, which I think is adorable. May have to add it to my list. And for the last one in this section, this pattern it looks so impressive. But again, it's not fair art, it is stranded colourwork. It's only using 2 colours, but there's a lot of variation in the design of it. It's an all-over colourwork pattern, but it's not got those structured geometric stripes with the alternating bands of the wider and the more narrow patterns going up the garment. So this is Cherishing Every Aspect of Life by bunnymuff, who is Mona Zillah. And yeah, it's adorable. So you've got foxes and hares and deers in a forest, in like a woodland on there. So yeah, beautiful design. This one has been knit in Shetland wool for the main designer's sample of it. So yeah, I'll give a nice consistent fabric. It's just not Fair Isle in the traditional sense of Fair Isle. So that was the first solo challenge that the knitters had in week 1. So yeah, 12 hours to knit a garment that they were then told was going to be modelled by the presenter. That I feel like is something they should have known when they were doing their designs. Because, you know, sizing, they would have been given sizes surely to design to. But anywho, next up we have the group challenge. I have a little bit of an issue with the concept of the group challenge in the Game of Wool show, because it's judged blind. They've only got one person winning each week. They've only got one person going home each week. What is the point of judging the group challenge blind? But anywho, I'm not here to critique the show. I can maybe do that at the end of the season when we see if it's found its feet or not. So the second challenge, the group challenge, was to work together in groups of 5 to knit sofa covers that fit the sofas precisely. In real life, knitters are not going to do that. But what you could do is get a similar vibe by knitting blankets to use as throws over your sofas. So I've picked out 4 patterns here, 2 for each team's effort to get the same sort of vibe as they had. Some of them you may need to resize the pattern a little bit or quite a lot, to get it to fit on a sofa. But you'll get the general sort of idea of what can be achieved through knitting, and I've got 1 crochet in there as well. So the first one up is the double twist cable blanket by Noelle Stiles. One team did a panelled cover with cables that they knit stocking stitch and cables, and they seamed it all together in panels, and they had it going in a gradient across the blanket, across the sofa cover. So you could achieve that with colour changes, by like changing your yarn as you knit across. But given that most blankets are knit the width side and cables tend to run the full length of the blanket, that might be a little bit awkward. You could also use a colour changing yarn and have it change as it goes up the cables rather than from side to side like they did in the show. But I think this blanket gives it the same sort of vibe with the chunky cables going up it. So using that as a throw would give you the same sort of feel, as would the Flip It and Reverse It blanket by Michelle Hepner, which is a nice snugly cabled blanket that looks very cosy. So that's the first team. The second team did an intarsia beach scene. So intarsia is a different type of colourwork. So instead of carrying the yarn behind the knitting as you do in stranded colourwork, which is why it's called stranded, and it gives you like 2 layers of yarn as you're knitting. Intarsia, you have 1 layer of yarn for the whole width of it, because you're using separate bobbins or little balls of wool and twisting them together and dropping and picking up and that kind of thing. So you've not got the strands running behind the knitting. So it's a different approach. So the first one I've got to show you, it's a baby blanket, so you would need to do quite a bit of sizing up to get this sort of a feel. But to give you an example of what intarsia can look like, this is the Foxy baby blanket by Sheri Cameron. So obviously you can, with a bit of practice and a bit of knowledge of how knitting stitches are structured, design your own intarsia. But you do have the capability to do these rather large pictorial pieces using intarsia. The other blanket I'm going to show you that'll give you an intarsia feel, but is actually a crochet blanket, is the Colour Swirl blanket by Divine Debris. So this one is not pictorial, it's more of a shape that's been created, and it's a similar technique just done in crochet rather than knitting. So they'll be twisting the yarn together in the same way for intarsia crochet as you would do for intarsia knitting. So that's my version of a sofa cover, because I figured blankets are just more likely to be made by knitters and crocheters than closely fitted sofa covers for the most part. Just bear with me while I have a quick sip of tea. I will do my best to edit out any slurping noises, but filming this quite late, so minimal editing will be happening. I've had a bit of a week, which included the charger cable for my laptop failing. So I've had to wait for that to arrive before I could film today, because all my research was on the laptop, which is just down here. So yeah, one of those weeks. Anywho, let's move on to episode 2 of Game of Wool. So the solo challenge in episode 2 was to make a costume for Italian Greyhound. It's adorable. So cute. This challenge, they were allowed to use a combination of knitting and crochet. So Channel 4, if you've stumbled across this video, your tagline for the show is Britain's Best Knitter. Crochet is not knitting. Yes, a lot of knitters crochet. Yes, a lot of crocheters knit. But someone whose primary craft is crochet is not necessarily going to be the best knitter. Why are we calling the show Britain's Best Knitter if we're doing crochet? Use a better tagline. Anywho, said, not here to critique the show. Dog coats. There are a plethora of dog coat patterns around. I mean, I am just looking at Ravelry and there were pages. So I've got 4 to show you. 3 knitting, 1 crochet. They were all on the first page of several on Ravelry. So the first one I have, and I've picked these largely because the vibes that they gave were similar to some of the vibes of the contestants' versions. So first one up is Ribbon Twist's Dog Coat, which is by Abigail Orlando. So one sample version is using 2 colours for the sort of woven ribbon pattern down the back. Some of the other samples just use 1 colour throughout. Both look pretty cute. So it got a nice little cabled rib around the neck, which I thought was rather sweet. And yeah, does what it says on the tin. It's a dog coat. Next up we have the Rainbow Rover dog coat, which is also by Abigail Orlando. She seems to like doing dog coat patterns. So this one, there was a rainbow unicorn version worked during the show. So this one gave very much those sorts of vibes, although in a much more knitter-friendly yarn than reduced by the contestant. But again, very sweet pattern. Wouldn't be too complicated to do. And you could riff off it with your own selection of colours. You could alter the stitch patterns slightly to give a little bit of your own flair for it, I would have thought, because you've at least got the sizing and the numbers, so you can play around with it a little bit if you've got experience in knitting and adapting patterns for your own pup. So yeah, I thought that was rather sweet. Third up, again, Abigail Orlando. And this is the Ice Cream Diva dog coat. This one made me think a little bit of the Notting Hill Carnival inspired dog costume. They were very creative, these particular entries in the show. I quite enjoyed the dog costume section. It also reminds me a little bit of the Commedia dell'arte inspired costume as well. So 2 for 1 in this one. For those of you who watched the show and weren't sure what Commedia dell'arte is, I'm a drama graduate. It's pretty cool. It's a very old form of Italian pantomime, effectively. So Piero and Pierrette are from Commedia dell'arte. Lots of mime happening and dancey theatre and stuff. So a lot of clowning has got echoes of Commedia dell'arte in it. British pantomime's got echoes of Commedia dell'arte in it. Yeah, it's had quite a heavy influence on modern day theatre art. So my theatre nerd heart was quite happy with that one. And my final dog coat pattern to show you is a crochet one. This one is by Yarnspirations Design Studio. Very simple granny motif dog coat. So again, that would be quite easy to adapt to suit whatever size of pup you have. So that was the dog coats section. I mean, there's only so many I can show you for doggy coats, to be fair, because they all follow the same basic shape and then are adjusted for the size of animal that you have. But yeah, that was a very cute challenge. The final team challenge, this was in teams of 3, so with 3 teams, was to do a 1980s inspired intarsia sweater out of mohair. Yeah, that didn't sound fun. The finished designs, or rather the designs that they tried to achieve, were pretty fun. They were like interesting patterns. They definitely met the brief. Some of them I would be tempted to knit up, but maybe not in mohair. But again, question Channel 4. If you are looking for Britain's best knitter, why have you got people on there that A, have never knitted a garment, and B, haven't done techniques like intarsia before? Surely part of your application process asks what type of techniques people are familiar with. It certainly does when you apply for the sewing bee. Not that I've applied for that a few times in the past. Not applying for it anymore, I'll put it that way. But anywho, 1980s inspired intarsia sweaters in mohair. So, there are some actual 1980s patterns listed on Ravelry. So I've pulled up some of those, and I've pulled up a couple of more modern ones as well that have the same sort of 1980s vibe. So first up we have the geometric sweater, which is listed as being by Bennett and Moon. So this is from Knitting with Style Autumn Winter Collection 1986. It's a very geometric sweater. You've got the longer length. There's lots of cropped lengths happening in the show. I think that's possibly a wise choice given the time constraints. But I remember 80s sweaters being quite long. Maybe that's because I was a child and I needed to grow into them. I don't know. But big, chunky shoulders on this one. Very Miami Vice from the 80s style, pushed up sleeves there. And yeah, pastel, geometric, intarsia pattern. So very 80s vibes. The next one is the Snake Sweater by Lala Ward. So this is from January 1984 from Beastly Knits. So the snake wraps all the way around the front and back of the sweater and down a sleeve. So you've got the black and whites on there as well. There's one pattern that had black and white geometric block print checkerboard type effect happening on it. So this one reminded me a bit of that. The third 1980s pattern to show you, going back to the dog coat theme, we have the Dashan sweater, also by Lala Ward from Beastly Knits in January 1984. It's a bit of a two for this one because there's a goose one as well that she's done. So, yeah, very 80s. I had a 101 Dalmatians sweatshirt, but that wasn't knitted, but still, animals on sweaters. Then we move on to the. Oh, actually, this one is also a 1980s pattern. So I think I just have the one. So, yeah, just the one that's more recent. So this one is by Sam Godden. It's the Rainbow Weather Sweater, which is from the Wool Workshop leaflet, Fun Sweater in Real Shetland. And this one reminds me of the sweaters that one of our, or that several of our weather men used to wear when I was a child in the 80s, and a few breakfast TV presenters. So yeah, you've got rainbow on the front. On the back there's a cloud with a lightning bolt coming out of it as well. So nice and fun. Very bold, very graphic sweater. So the final intarsia sweater pattern with a bit of an 80s feel to it. It's actually not dissimilar to one of the contestant teams' versions. So one of the teams did balloons, and they tried to do balloon sleeves to go with it. They had one that was short and ornamented in red with the gathers done with a tie string around the cuffs. I thought that was quite clever. And then one full-length sleeve. But they did intarsia balloons on the front and the back, and they stitched on strands of yarn to make the bow for the string, so the strings were dangling down as well. So there were some nice and clever features in that particular team's version. But this one reminded me of that. It's the Pull Femme Ballon by La Droguerie. Hopefully my high school French has got me somewhat close to pronunciation there. So this is a whole bunch of balloons and the Eiffel Tower in intarsia, and this is a September 2025 pattern, so very much of the moment and in time for Game of Wool. So that's my pattern suggestions for if you would like to knit something inspired by the Game of Wool, but not from one of the companies that is using the show as an advert. Not that that's a problem necessarily, because obviously they have sponsorship contracts with the show. But they are releasing the contestants' patterns. Their contract is with the production company. So the production company is receiving the money for those patterns, not the contestant. So, see how you feel about that. I mean, some of them are pretty cool patterns, and they are doing them as kits. So if you want to replicate what was done in the show, you can. But yeah, make your choices. They're probably not something that I would pick up and do, at least the ones that have come out so far. Mostly because I don't enjoy knitting in the chunky bulky yarn very much, so I can't see me doing a chunky bulky tank top. I'm not convinced it would wear particularly well in that sort of yarn either. Chunkier yarns quite often are less heavily spun, so they tend to pill more quickly, so things don't look as fresh and as new for as long. I have no intention of knitting a fully mohair 1980s style intarsia jumper. Not in mohair. That doesn't do it for me. But if that's what floats your boat, you do you. So, what do we think? Do we want me to come back in a couple of weeks with a roundup of potential patterns for the next couple of episodes? I'm not going to do one immediately after the next episode, which is Sunday, so tomorrow as this drops, because they're doing swimsuits. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's going to be that many patterns to choose from for that particular challenge. And why? Why are we doing swimwear in wool? My dad can tell you how ineffective they are, because his mother knitted one in like the 50s, 60s. As soon as you go in the sea, not any good. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that one. So yeah, if you're interested in seeing a few more sort of pattern ideas of similar sorts of projects to the ones that they're doing on the show, let me know down below, and I'll come back in a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks time, with a roundup from the next chunk of episodes. To let you know what I think, and to let you know what I found that goes in with those particular tasks. In the meantime, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I will see you in my next video, but until then, there's this one here that may be of interest to you, and I will see you soon. But until then, happy crafting, and bye-bye for now.